Welcome to another Requel Pitch podcast episode of Tyler in the Car. I'm Tyler, your host, and today's pitch kind of brings together a lot of elements that I love. And it's an interesting pitch because it's not exactly a reboot, remake. It's more of a pitch of a material that already exists that should be made into some sort of film or live action. And a lot of stuff I just feel anymore limited series, mini-series type for a streamer when you're doing any kind of book, because I feel like you need the space to tell the story. I think sometimes I take advantage of that and stretch things out, but here we go. So today's pitch combines horror, folklore, and comics. And one of my favorite comic book writers. I'm a big fan, student of folklore, the reason why we tell stories and the need to tell stories and explain things. And it's why a lot of my pitches are saturated in that area, because it's something that appeals to me, that I absorb. And since I'm pitching, redoing projects, a lot of it's on my mind. So today's conversation is about the graphic novel series published by DC and Vertigo Comics by Scott Snyder, entitled American Vampire. American Vampire lasted for, I think, 8 volumes. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure it's 8. It could be 9. I can't remember. It's been about 2 years since I reread the entire series. Scott Snyder did. Then he was writing it, took a little bit of a break, and then came back and finished up the last volume. It's a dual protagonist story, with the original American Vampire, Skinner Sweet, is a Western outlaw in the 1800s who is bitten and becomes the first, what is dubbed, American vampire. Throughout the book series, you fall into different categories: the Carpathian vampires and such, and more, which are more common Dracula-esque vampires. And one of the most unique things about the American Vampire is a lot of the same tropes of vampirism doesn't affect them. Their biggest thing is gold. Gold is the element that can kill an American vampire. And the first trade collected graphic novel is split between the two stories, and part of it was actually written by Stephen King along with Scott Snyder, because he was such a fan of Snyder's book that he had written before starting to write in comics. And we have some of the backstory on Skinner Sweet, his creation, but then we have the main antagonist, the other protagonist, of Pearl. Now, Pearl is a 1920s Hollywood actress on the rise. Is it 20s or 30s? See, I'm drawing a blank. I'm moving slow. It's early. And through events that happen that lead her to these people who are more of your Carpathian vampires in Hollywood, and they see how they run the town and what they're doing to these people and young actors and actresses. Pearl is beaten and almost left for dead, but then Skinner Sweet, for some reason, turns Pearl, and she becomes the second American vampire. Now, as we go along, we meet a large group of characters, and I don't want to give everything away in this pitch, because I think that graphic novels are a great medium. There's comic books and there's graphic novels, and a lot of that's the way that it's written, because comics, like say Superman, because I'm a big Superman fan, a lot of them are written to be ongoing series that never have an ending. You have arcs, and then sometimes you get graphic novel specials that are closed stories, which are fine. But then you have these stories, much like with American Vampire, where there's a beginning to it, and then the series ends eventually. And you see from the beginning to the end how it comes full circle, and it's one epic story. And as somebody who loves film, and when I'm reading a graphic novel, it's like I'm reading the storyboards with the dialogue, and I'm connecting and building the movie in my mind, because each panel is a shot. And it's a medium that I love and that it works well for me. And with American Vampire, it has such great aesthetics because you tap back into like this Western, early Hollywood in the first volume or trade. Trade is usually a collection of an arc in a comic run, and it's usually about 6 issues. It can give or take. And what's interesting is each trade moves the story further in time. And I think the last volume we do get into like Skinner Suite and the different wars. We get them in the 60s, and I think the last one takes place in the 70s or the 80s. I really should reread it all, but it's a really interesting just story. We have all the elements that you would want in a great epic story, but also you have your organization, secret organization that hunts monsters because they know about the vampires, the vassals of the Morning Star. You have other like just rogue vampire hunters and characters, and it's filled. And my pitch really comes to the idea is this is another one of those examples with the streaming service where each trade volume would be a season. 6 issues, but you have a lot of ground cover and you can pad it out. And because of the time jumps, each season, it can be like 6 episode seasons. Basically each episode maybe like one version of the trade. It could be, you can tweak it, right? But the idea is, I think it is a property that needs time. Because of how it ends, like you could feel somewhat satisfied, like if you just did the first trade as a movie. But there's so much ground to cover. And you want to expand that universe. You want to expand that world because it is a very sprawling world that Scott Snyder has crafted in his American Vampire series. And, we're seeing a resurgence in, vampires in culture and in films. Recent movies hit and miss. They're never quite out of the culture. I started reading this back in 2013. When I first read what had been done of American Vampire at that time. And then I reread it, the whole series about 2 years ago. Maybe it was, 2023, in the spring. It was early. It was right before I did my huge Flash reread. And, I remember, like, in the background, they had True Blood had, I think, recently ended. I never got to the end of the show. But, like, it was just these popular elements again. I was reading this where I felt like I had a really unique, new kind of spin on this element. And I was like, that should be a series. And here we are now. And a book series that deals with vampires that Jania loves, the Black Dagger Brotherhood, is supposed to be getting a series on a streamer I had never heard of. And it's like a romantic Black Dagger series. And Jania and I are both hesitant on the production because I've read a couple of the books with her because I support the things my wife loves, and I'm just interested in this low budget streamer, like what they're actually going to be able to produce production value wise. And we always want our projects that we love to have the best production value that it can. And I think American Vampire would be a very interesting concept because you get to blend so many elements: the Western, the early Hollywood, the horror, and that's just for the first season, and then history and time. So Scott Snyder's an amazing comic book writer. His Batman run is legendary and forever changed elements of the character. His works that he's done outside that, he did a book called Witches, which is really creepy, and it is supposed to be getting an animated series sometime soon. Scott posted about that. And he's done some other things, Nocturnal, Noctera, and I just highly recommend checking out any of his works. So today's pitch: to make American Vampire.